Hi there, and thank you for clicking on my video. Today we're going to talk about uh, when you would want to force direct impacts on weapons that are traditionally AoE. So there are a couple weapons, like the Epitaph, for example, where they have traditionally been used as like primers and AoEs to like apply as many statuses as possible, like a good primer. Um, but the direct hit from these weapons is multiplicative. So there are times where you would actually want to do direct impact damage, and these weapons are very, very strong. Let me turn the in-game sound down. Even though it's a primer weapon, the direct impact of the weapon itself is multiplicative, and so is the charge shot on this weapon. Now, when would you want to use this? Is, say, for example, against acolytes, against bosses, that sort of thing. If you have like a really tough target you need to bring down, and something that you really want to do a ton of damage with, one of the things we can do, and you can see the damage climbing now, and it's the raw damage, not the AoE that's doing the boosted damage. If we take Zadas, for example, and use it with the Epitaph, it will force impact as long as we hit the bubble. Because you're not going to be able to see the little disc, right? So Zadas covers us with this. And essentially turns all of these guys into trash mobs. So what are some uses for this? Things like the Trumna, where you have a really tough enemy, or an acolyte, for example, but you have a weapon that's traditionally AoE. You can utilize Zadas to force the direct impact. And this works on things like the Brahma, for example, where even though it's additive, but say you want all of the arrows to force a direct impact, you can trap the alt fire in the Zadas. And since the Trumna has such a high damage alt fire, we would gain the benefit of the direct damage ticks from it. But it's really things like the Epitaph that benefit the most from it, because it is multiplicative on the direct damage, on the quick attack, and the charge shot. And Zadas also traps Neja too, by the way. So it allows us to gain what would normally we wouldn't be able to, like, even see. It now forces the direct impact. Lovely orange crits. So how does this help? I've been actually having pretty good luck, and it was probably intended, using the Epitaph to bring down Thrax. especially with the multiplicative secondary or the charge fire. The charge fire does hella damage. And with the hemorrhage build, if you don't use velocity, lethal tempo, or sorry, lethal torrent on its own brings you up to 2.4, which is enough to keep the bonus of hemorrhage. If you use anemic, it pushes you over. And just because we have so few mod spaces available, and with this quick attack being a primer, it ends up being really solid as like a self primer. And when you get something big enough, you use a charge attack to one-shot it. So, food for thought. Going to be a short video. I've been having some serious luck with this, and even with like a quick attack build where you take off hemorrhage, you can just do like a corrosive heat build, and use lethal torrent or even the faction mod, and then velocity. To get your attack speed. Now, obviously, the big issue is going to be seeing. So color it black, so the explosion is harder to see. But you'll get your corrosive, you'll get your heat. And zadas forces the direct impact. So it's a different way of playing, but it gives you the spam ability back. Not bad for a weapon that's traditionally a primer. And even though we're using the quick attack most of the time, I still do put crit chance, crit damage on it. For the heavy charge shot, if you don't like doing that, and you want to just use it as a run and gun, keep the faction mod, ditch this, do fulmination and like a hornet strike, because you're not losing that much crit chance. Like, it's only like 3 and change %. But it just, the crit chance alone helps keep velocity up. And you can see the difference. But because the explosion's so big, it's anything that gets hit by it. And we're just one-shotting now. So, to each their own, but I found the Epitaph still does have a niche, outside of being a primer. Obviously, having it being a primer with a maxed rank pistol pestilence is pretty good, but it kind of feels like this weapon, being a self primer and a damage dealing weapon with such like a niche use, it feels like it was intended for the Zeraman. The more I use it, especially when I'm doing like cascade runs. because you would still run crit chance, crit damage. You would run hemorrhage. Unrank this. Drag it over there and do lethal. Without velocity. And the charge time is fast enough that you can still use it. And just go like a raw damage build like corrosive. You could even do something like that, since it's a single stat, right, for punch. Like for raw damage. So even with this, it still feels pretty good. And I've enjoyed using it so far. I've taken it up against like 500-600s. I had to leave the Cascade run, so we only got like 30 minutes into it or whatever that was. But this weapon has multiplicative damage on the quick attack and the charge shot. So the charge shot is capable of hitting hella damage. And especially with the scaling on hemorrhage and how many times you can proc it with multi-shot. I even rolled a Riven to put here. So it's food for thought. It lowers the crit chance down to where it's not so many oranges, but it's got multi-shot and it's got magazine capacity. Obviously, the dispo's killing me on this, but food for thought, because this weapon does hella damage even with just like a status build and using quick attacks. So if you haven't seen this before, give it a consideration. Obviously, you don't have to put a format into it, though if you're running things like the galvanized shot, galvanized diffusion, hemorrhage, you're probably going to end up putting quite a few format into it. And also, for those in the clan and the alliance, next time you guys see Prime Pistol ammo mutation come up from Barrow, Barrow this time was pretty lackluster. Make sure to get it. There is a huge difference between this and the Vigilante stuff. Like, regular pistol ammo mutation is 50%. This one's 92%. The difference between the Vigilante... I've swapped over all of my builds because the Vigilante supplies is 30%, while the primed mod is 92%. It's almost double. So, food for thought. This is just sort of how I've been getting by with like higher damage. The Trumna, for example, I've been trying out on the Thrax. Because the damage is just so high on the alt fire. Running around, picking up kills with the primary and saving the Trumna alt fire for the Thrax has been working out pretty well. So I'm just looking for Cascade builds, but I found that this is a pretty interesting way of getting the direct damage plus the alt fire AoE on these, where it would be the opposite, where it would be the AoE priming on the Epitaph, with the charge shot being practically a guaranteed headshot. You just hit the top of the Zada's Whisper bubble, and it'll drag down to wherever it's going, and you can force a headshot. So, food for thought. I've been having fun with it. So, take it or leave it. Have a blessed day, guys.